for any of us, our biggest strength can become a weakness at some point for us. So I think this is sort of a tale of that, and knowing what your strengths are and leaning into them, but also know when does your strength tip over into a weakness.
Welcome to Management Muse.
Because everybody deserves a better manager.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today on Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi. And today we're going to talk about 3 ways that individuals screw up their growth as managers.
Yeah.
And ways that organizations screw up growing their employees into managers.
We can cover all of them.
That's right. We'll cover it all. Today I am joined by Mel Cidado. She is a 25-year veteran of Fortune 200 companies. She focused on HR, but today, if you were looking for her, you'd find her at Breakthrough Coaching. All right, Mel, so I'm going to kick it off. What are 3 ways that you see individuals screw up sort of their path in growing into managers?
Yeah, I like to use stories to kind of bring these to life a little bit. And share stories of my clients and folks that I've worked with over the years just to bring it, make it more real. So one recently promoted VP that I worked with she is very smart, driven, passionate, has been a high achiever her whole career. And she seemed to be onboarding to her role really well and making good progress. But her boss started to notice that she was consistently emailing late at night. Her calendar was packed back to back. Their one-on-ones started to change in tone so that she started to notice that it seemed like she was doing work herself a lot more than she anticipated. And she seemed really stressed and stretched thin and snapping more than usual. And so that's when, they both started to realize that there was a problem. And if they didn't do something different, she was at risk for burnout. So in this example, really the struggle that both of them had here was assuming naturally that because she'd been a high achiever and been great at every job she'd had before, that she was naturally going to figure this one out too. And so there were certainly some challenges that the employee was facing too, right? Newly promoted, working harder than ever, saw her peers doing that too. So it felt right. But she started to notice that she wasn't in all the same rooms that they were all in, and she wasn't getting tapped for broader projects like they were. And so she really started to doubt herself. And so she was always assuming she'd figure it out too. But without help and communication, it became a challenge. So that's the first one.
So let me just, I want to just say, I'm impressed with the boss.
Yes.
Because they noticed the calendar issues. And I think a lot of bosses aren't paying that level of detail, attention. And then instead of just assuming like the worst about her, they actually kind of thoughtfully put it together and are like, oh, this person is like struggling.
Yeah.
And
it's
so,
huge.
I really want to just point that out because I don't think everybody gets that. Usually your boss isn't thinking about you until like there's a dumpster fire associated with you. And because it's best if your boss is not thinking about you. And then when they do, they're not usually all that curious. They just think you're screwing up.
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I don't mean all bosses, but I mean, like that's kind of the tendency, right?
Yeah.
Because they're a little upset about whatever dumpster fire. So this person seemed to be ahead of the game and then actually was curious about what was going on and then tried to be constructive in helping. So what did they do to try to resolve that?
Yeah, so they really needed to hit the reset button on what success looked like together. And, what does an ideal VP look like in their company? Like what skills and behaviors are needed, not just what technical skills, right? Like, I think that's one thing people get stuck on because I'm technically great. That means I can lead too. And so that's a big shift that this person needed to make. as they stepped into this more senior role. And so they really needed to sit down and focus on what things she needed to stop doing, what things she needed to start doing, what things are great and need to continue. Because it wasn't all bad. It was just, as you mentioned, the boss was noticing there were some signals that like, something's off here. And she followed her gut, her intuition on it, and started having those conversations. I think with this person, they struggled to delegate, which is a big struggle I see with people in leadership roles. And I think oftentimes the boss assumes that they don't delegate because they don't trust other people. But when you talk to the person, usually they don't delegate because they think it's their job to do the work that they're doing.
Sometimes they don't trust others. It's sometimes also that they don't want to burden others. They don't feel
absolutely.
like they can burden them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you're right. I think sometimes it's just like that. And you want to get into this, I think, role clarity. Like the problem with if you don't really understand the expectations of the role, if you're just looking around and sort of putting it together, then you can wind up basically taking on more than you should. And sometimes you're taking on things that hit other people and then cause conflict.
Yeah. I think role clarity is a big part of it. And, I know a lot of people quote Brene Brown, but clarity is kindness. And I think that's a quote that she uses that resonates in this situation. This was a struggle for both of them at first, but stepping into their relationship and relationship first and having the open conversation and dialogue that they needed to have help them work through building the clarity and getting her on the right track. So really that's all I would add on clarity.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one.
That's
That's the one way that people screw up their career path by basically, I think it's just kind of a natural outcome, right? Like usually the people who are getting promoted are high achievers and you have a track record of being highly successful. And so you think, especially if it's happened to you a number of times, you think that there's pretty much nothing you can't do if you work hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And that confidence is really important to have when moving into a new role. It really is. Yeah.
Sure. And I think that it's great, but that doesn't mean that's the most efficient or effective path.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or the one that's going to feel as good. At the end of the day, you're going to remember how you felt moving into that new role. And when there's not a clear path for you, it can be hard. And sometimes the stumbles are good. Sometimes you learn a lot from failure and making mistakes. So you want to encourage those things, but also encourage the learning and the growth so that the path is the right path.
So solid number one. What's number two?
Putting too much value on expertise. So the story that I tell around this is, a leader that I was coaching was the company's go-to expert on this particular function. So every problem in that function that needed to be solved came to him. But when broader issues happened, he almost never weighed in, never had an opinion on things going outside of his world. So he had a good but not great performance review, and they kind of gave him vague feedback like, we want more from you. And he didn't understand what that meant. So the mistake that I think the company makes is putting more value on the expertise and, rewarding that expertise, which is great. But then that also encourages him to have tunnel vision and not see beyond where he's at. So the lack of that company-wide perspective actually created some challenges for him in his performance. For him, he valued being the person that was, precise and had the expertise. He felt knowing the most in his lane was going to get him more respect and, broader opportunities, but he just couldn't connect all the dots. And so we had to work with them to start to have those conversations.
That's interesting. It reminds me of a story I think it was on Graham Norton. I don't know, scrolling. You never know where you find these things. Anyway, Matthew McConaughey was talking about basically the same thing. He became a niche player in terms of like being a rom-com, right? Like he was the rom-com king for a while there. And he had to spend, close to 2 years of basically turning down or complete silence from Hollywood, unsure whether or not he tanked his career, but determined that he was going to be more than rom-com. Mm-hmm. And it took about 2 years, and then they started calling for it, and it was all at once. So that was when, what was that movie? The Dallas Players Club, which was like as far away from rom-com as you could possibly get. Yeah. And, some of those other like roles that really showed more diversity for him started to come in. And I think that's kind of what you're describing in terms of the organization. Like this person just it was so strong on one thing, they became known for it.
Yeah.
And I could see how, you think, okay, this is job security, right? Like I'm the expert, everybody's turning to me. Obviously it's valuable, and it is job security in that sense, but it's not flourishing. Like it's not the growth component of work. And over time, I think that person would have become very, very bored with just being that one thing. Unless, I don't know what that one thing is. Maybe it's like an ocean, so maybe it'd be just fine. But there's the risk that being known for just one thing and doing that day in and only talking about that, or mostly talking about that, would lead to sort of boredom in the job.
Yeah. And, I think there are people out there that have their thing and just want to do their thing. And that's great. I think what the performance review was signaling for him was that just his thing wasn't quite enough. And so, and for him, he just felt great being an expert. He loved being able to help people on this thing. So maybe that's the right kind of role for him. But again, the success factors changed. They're different than what he thought they were. And so this is, again, where some clarity and connection and communication becomes pretty important.
And so what did they ultimately do? Is there any resolution to this story, or is it just too new?
Too new. This one doesn't have a resolution yet. However, I know in the work that I'm doing with the employee that, one of the fears that has come up is visibility. So, I think there are some feelings about politics. And, do I need to play politics? And so I think working through, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you advocate for your team? How do you tell the stories of your successes, your failures, your progress in a way that connects with other audiences and other stakeholders?
It's interesting, right? Because I think introverts do struggle with this, right? Like, I suspect, obviously, do not know. But I suspect that because he was introverted, he found a workaround that made it so he was comfortable in organizations. It totally makes sense that he would choose expertise. We talk about introvert and extrovert, like introverts are, I get upset because I feel like they don't get appreciated appropriately. Like we treat them like they have like social problems, which that's not the case. They just socialize differently. And so how an introvert socializes is they don't have fluffy conversations with you because they don't want to be the center of attention, which that's hitting on his visibility. And when you are the center of attention, you can have deep conversations because you're hosting a bunch of people. It's social media, right? Like the people who initially hit social media and were telling the depths of their life story on there, people were like, whoa, like what is going on here? I didn't need to know that much about you. And so if you're the center of attention, you don't go deep. And introverts like to go deep. And so that's why you find them on the periphery having fantastic, deep conversations. They are having a conversation, but it's a deep one and it's usually one-on-one. And so it totally makes sense that he would basically find the workaround to protect himself that, okay, I'm going to make sure I know what conversation is coming. I'm going to become this expert in this thing. People seem to appreciate it. Now I know what they're going to be talking to me about. And it's like a nice little safe world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to cross boundaries and you have to work with other departments. And so even if it's a world of expertise that like he could grow forever in, you still have to do some bridging.
Right. And finding the way that works for you to do it is important, to your point. Having one-on-one conversations with people versus being in large groups is a way you can start to do that. And so finding the best next step for each person in that space and finding what works for you and what doesn't. You may find there's certain things that just don't work for you, but testing it out, giving it a shot. There seems to be a hump sometimes we all need to get over when we're sitting on the fence of like, I know I need to do this, but it's kind of scary to do it. I'm not sure. Sometimes you just need to know and figure out what that one best next step is, just to help you get over that fear and step into a new space and try something different. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just, progress is all you're really looking for.
Right. You don't like this person isn't going to change overnight. They're not going to change into an extrovert. They just have to figure how to harness being an introvert.
Yeah.
And come out of the safety of what they've built.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that you pull off of the idea that they are only going to do really effectively, they're only going to be drawn to the deep one-on-one conversations. And so how do you get that in a workplace? Well, actually not that hard, right? Like, okay, we're two departments and we would be better off if our two departments were coordinating. So now we have a shared goal. Well, I don't have to talk to you about that shared goal. I mean, at some point I may have to, but I don't have to start in a large room with an audience talking about that. I can go directly to you. And now we're not having a fluffy political conversation. Mm-hmm. Instead, we're having a conversation where like, it should be a great conversation, because if we can make our two departments work better, both of us have a better life.
Right. And sometimes when you're in that space where you're not sure how to do that, or it seems like too big of a step, planning the meeting alone can help, outlining what are our shared goals? What questions do I need to ask to better understand that department's goal? You can break it down very specifically for yourself if that feels more comfortable while you're just initially stepping into this space or just trying it out. So I think you're right on in terms of how you can do this very easily. You just have to find your way.
Yeah, it's there. The shared goal is there, and you can do it through one-on-one. And then, quite possibly, you do want visibility. So at some point you have to speak up in the larger meetings, but it doesn't have to be like constant.
No. I think there's an assumption that the loudest voices are the ones that are most respected. And I don't know that that's the case. I think there are often people who are always the ones speaking in meetings, and sure, they get attention. But I think there's a lot of value placed in the person who speaks up once and says something very valuable because they've been thinking about it and processing it and have something really insightful to share.
Well, I think that, the flip side of that is you can speak so much that people actually tune you out because it's just like, oh, they're talking again.
Yeah.
So probably both types of personality you could use by pulling a little bit towards the other.
Yeah.
And so when you speak, you're speaking more because you offer great value. I know I have a trouble with it. In group settings, like I remember being a kid in high school, and I loved my math teacher in high school. She was just a fabulous lady. So part of it is like, I really loved my teacher. But she would ask a question And like it was a constant situation where she'd ask a question, the room would be silent. And so I would just be there and I couldn't take the silence. I would just throw out an answer. And it was, sometimes I knew and I would take the risk, but sometimes I had no idea what she was talking about. Nobody else in the room did either. And so like, I'd just be like negative pi. Like I would just like break the ice by saying something that was clearly wrong. And she always appreciated that. But I understand that extroverts struggle with silence.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to just decide that we're going to go through that struggle.
Yeah. Step up when needed, step back when needed. Knowing and reading that is hard for everyone, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure is. But you know if you're an extrovert or an introvert usually. And so if you know your inclination is to talk too much or not enough, push yourself to do the opposite.
Yeah.
All right. That was a little side thing on introverts, but I think that was really an interesting example of just how much like a dominant personality trait can actually shape how you structure your work and your relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for any of us, our biggest strength can become a weakness at some point for us. So I think this is sort of a tale of that, and knowing what your strengths are and leaning into them, but also know when does your strength tip over into a weakness.
Yep. Yeah. Everything seems like everything can be either a strength or the same thing can in some situations be a strength and in some situations a weakness.
Yeah. It's all situational. Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes. This episode is sponsored by Culsure.com, Culsure.com. If you're looking for a comprehensive organizational survey so you can figure out what the heck is going on with your employees, give us a call. Culsure.com, Culsure.com. All right. That's a good number 2. What's your number 3?
So number 3 is believing that results speak for themselves. So the story around this is there was someone I was coaching that led a major turnaround that saved their company a lot of money. Her engagement scores for her team were going up. So on the surface, on the numbers, everything looked amazing. And she was really recognized for those results. The problem was her peers avoided her. And her key stakeholders didn't trust her because they didn't feel like she was very collaborative. So when the chance came for a promotion, she was really upset that she didn't get it. And it was because the value of these peer and stakeholder relationships that weren't necessarily within her team. So the mistake around this is, believing that those key metrics, KPIs, results alone are going to define leadership strength. So great results can hide other risks that aren't immediately obvious unless you know the person or you've tried to work with the person in a situation. And so that can really, for the employees, compromise your long-term career growth.
And so were the other risks all relational? Like she was so task focused that she missed the relational?
Partially, yeah. She thought leadership success was really about setting a high standard for her team, supporting her team through that, and protecting them from other influences. So she didn't realize that protection she was putting around her team was actually too strong and making her be less respected by her peers and stakeholders that were critical stakeholders in leadership. So the results were great, but people were sort of so-so about her beyond her team. Her team loved her. Team thought she was great.
Yeah, I could see how the team would love her. And I think that's like that's again like the balance between, because you do want to protect your people, but you can't be so difficult in protecting them that you're basically getting excluded.
Right. It's finding a balance between that advocacy and support and the collaboration with peers. And that's hard sometimes.
It is. It's hard for sure. I think sometimes also I've seen similar things. I think one of the lines that managers miss sometimes is you still have to see people honestly. Like they think protecting their team, it's wrapped up with loyalty and not admitting when like maybe like the team didn't do something exactly right. Even if it was accidental that they didn't do something right, or, you know, if they just flat out screwed something up. And I've seen like some managers come in and, you know, not able to, I don't know if individually they could recognize it and they were just not willing to like publicly recognize it, not willing to publicly look like they were admitting that there was any aspect of their team that was flawed, or if they like literally were completely missing it because they so strongly identified with their team that they just like you can become so strongly identified with a group that you become fragile in terms of being able to take feedback. Because when you strongly identify, any insult feels like a personal punch in the gut. And so I'm not sure like where this person would land. And I think both scenarios are possible. Like you could be doing it because it actually hurts you to have somebody external like indicate anything negative, or you could be doing it because you do not want to be seen as visually not loyal to your particular people. And so you probably have to figure that out, because in the first case, if it's because you're getting hurt so much, like that's hard because you're actually filtering out information because you identify so strongly. And you have to like, you're going to have a gut reaction to anything that's said. And you probably just need to come back and be like, okay, I know I'm super sensitive about anything about my team. And so I need to like take a step back and like really find whether or not they have a point. Like sometimes I have that conversation in my head because, you know, whether it's because I'm protective of somebody or because I don't like the person who's giving me advice. And I'll like be like, okay, do they have a point? Because the more important thing is to actually grow and be better. And so if it's the first and you find that you're just like really sensitive, you gotta step back and do that. And then the second thing I think is you also need to make sure that you have more diversity in terms of the groups that you find really important, because this group has become way too important to you. Like you need more multiple dimensions of your identity if one is causing you to feel that level of pain. You know, because everybody has bad days, and it's good when you can go to a different group and have it happen where they feel like, okay, I had a bad day at work, but people actually do like me. And I am actually good at these other things. Helps like rebalance you. And then, you know, in the other case where it's like visibility and loyalty, well, you can still be visibly loyal, but still be honest. When working with other people, external stakeholders to like your department, and they're coming at you because there's some sort of problem within your department. So it's basically putting you between the people you think you're supposed to protect and the people you're also supposed to be working with, but you're not responsible for. You know, I think you can have okay, I get it. How can we fix it? Like be more constructive or be more curious. And when you show that, it's not that I'm going to come after my own team members and be mad because somebody external had a valid point and we weren't our best. Instead, you're like, okay, we didn't do our best. I understand why we got there. How can we actually do better going forward? And instead, it's much more of like a cooperative conversation and a supportive conversation. But like the underlying theme is we're going to take feedback that's real and relevant, and we're going to try to actually become even better than what we already are.
Yeah, it's like the responsibility, the definition of responsibility for this person was super high, like responsible for her team, right? Like there's also, I think a level of perfectionism that kind of comes into play as well. Like these results speak for me and my identity and who I am. And so I'm proud of these results. I'm proud of what I've done, what my team has done. There may also be a bit of hyper independence when it comes to peers. So unpacking why is that there, right? Is there a lack of trust? If there is, what is driving that? So,
and is it a lack of trust that stems from the organization, or is it a lack of trust that you're carrying baggage from
other things in life? Yes, that's exactly where I was going. We're on the same page, because there are people that their personality is to be hyper independent. And that's okay. It's just again, situationally, how does it work? How do you kind of break down these barriers? If you're great at what you do and you want that promotion, you have to start thinking about how to do things differently. And that's hard. If you are a pretty, hyper independent person, if you are, feeling like results need to be perfect for you to get ahead, like those are things that will drive you to, behave a certain way.
It's all good intentions.
Right. It's all well intended.
It's all well intended. It's just that the focus is so narrowly focused on the leader.
Yeah.
Or in your case, the leader's focus is so narrowly focused on the people, their people, that they miss the harm that might be happening outside of that group.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And like today, I went through examples to kind of bring these to life of individuals, but these are very, very common themes across my clients. Everything I brought up today are things I see
them too.
Over and over again. Yeah. And so that's why they've made my list of the top 3 mistakes. And it's often, like we talked about, it's often a clarity gap, a communication gap, and sometimes just having the courage to have a really tough conversation with someone about what's working, what's not working. Not that you want to be a jerk about it, but open, honest conversations can prevent a lot of these things. And I think when leaders start to have those more open conversations, they can sometimes fall into a space where they feel like, oh, this is too much. Like this person needs more help than I have time to give them, or they need a perspective that I don't exactly know how to offer them or how to communicate to them. And that's when you can lean into, I think a lot of times leaders think, if this is my employee that's struggling, I need to step in and be the one to solve it for them. But certainly as you, move on in your career and you progress, broader perspectives are just as helpful as your boss, if not more helpful. And so, mentors, peer mentors in leadership, mentors in other roles outside of the company, networking and connecting with people that are not in your world. Coaches, those are support jobs that are out there, support functions, support things that you can lean into so that it's not all on you to work through these challenges with your employee. You're never alone. I think a lot of times we assume we're alone in solving problems when there's a whole host of people out there that are experts and can help.
Very well said. All right. If you felt like this content was useful, we would appreciate you subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing, all those things. And Mel would love to hear from you. And we would love to hear from you. So comment for us. But Mel, you can find her at getbreakthroughcoaching.com. Thank you, Mel. It was great.
Thank you, Cindi.
Thanks for the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Me too.
Everybody have a great day. See you next time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast/YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Sarah, and Rebecca. And then just as a last minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.